You wake up to the sound of someone coughing, but not the polite, excuse me kind of cough. No, this is a wet, chest-rattling hack that makes you wonder if a lung just hit the floor. Your eyes open to the dim light of a smoky morning. The kind where the air is heavy and your throat burns just from breathing. The ground beneath you is hard, uneven, and damp, and the blanket you've been sleeping under is about as warm as a paper towel. Welcome to 1776, where luxury means you only have 3 blisters on each foot and not 4. You sit up, and before you can even figure out if it's morning or some weird dream sequence, you catch sight of your surroundings. Forget the crisp, romantic images from paintings. Those only exist because the painters got paid to make everything look noble. What you've got is mud everywhere. It squishes under boots, clings to trousers, and splatters up into places you didn't know mud could reach. The smell? A bold, intoxicating blend of wood smoke, damp wool, and the ever-present perfume of horse manure. Somewhere in that mix, you're sure you can detect the faint tang of unwashed humanity. Because let us face it, no one here has seen soap in weeks. And then there's the noise. You've got the crackle of campfires, the occasional bang of a musket being cleaned, and someone shouting your name like they're personally offended you're still lying down. Turns out that someone is your new best friend/nightmare. A grizzled sergeant whose breath smells like he gargled whiskey and raw onions for breakfast. His idea of a morning greeting? Yelling inches from your face about how you're late for roll call. You haven't even stood up yet and already today's looking like a bad sequel to yesterday. The year might be 1776, but don't think for a second. This is the glamorous birth of a nation you learned about in school. There's no inspiring soundtrack, no clean uniforms, no epic slow-motion scenes of flags unfurling in the wind. This is the messy, stinking, painfully human version, the one where people are building a country from scratch while trying not to starve or freeze to death. Freedom? Yeah, that's the marketing slogan. The reality is more like, congratulations, you're now a pawn in a game where the stakes are everything and the prize is maybe not dying. You look down at your boots, or rather, the sad excuses for boots that have been handed to you. The leather's cracked, the soles are so thin you can feel every pebble underfoot. And the smell wafting up is enough to knock out a horse. Your clothes are scratchy wool, a fabric designed by someone who clearly hated skin. Every inch of your body feels like it's either too hot, too cold, or both at the same time. And don't even get me started on your stomach. It's been growling so long it's practically learned to speak English. Somewhere nearby, a group of men are huddled around a pot, stirring something that looks like boiled wallpaper paste. That's breakfast. Hardtack softened in mystery broth. The bread is so hard you could use it as a weapon, and in fact, some people have. The trick is to soak it just long enough that it won't break your teeth, but not so long it turns into mush that smells suspiciously like wet dog. Bon appetit. The vibe here isn't patriotic parade. It's halfway through a road trip with no snacks and everyone's lost. People are grumpy, sleep-deprived, and constantly scratching at fleas. A couple of guys are arguing about whose turn it is to clean the latrine, which, by the way, is just a polite word for hole in the ground that no one actually wants to be near. Someone else is trying to patch a hole in his tent with bits of old shirt, while another is picking lice out of his hair like he's searching for buried treasure. You're surrounded by the constant reminder that nothing here is guaranteed. The weather's unpredictable, food is scarce, and the only thing more unreliable than the supplies is the pay. The Continental Congress has promised wages, but those promises are about as solid as your hardtack. Most of the men here have been told that the real payment is liberty, which sounds noble until you realize liberty doesn't keep you warm at night. And yet, despite all the misery, there's this strange buzzing energy, the kind that comes from knowing you re-part of something that might change the course of history. You hear whispers about battles won and lost, about Washington rallying the troops, about the British tightening their grip and the rebels pushing back harder. Some of it's true, some of it's rumor, and some of it's just wishful thinking. But it's enough to keep everyone moving, even when their bodies are begging them to stop. Then there's the smell of gunpowder that occasionally drifts through camp. It's a sharp, metallic tang that makes your pulse quicken. You know it means someone's practicing or that trouble's not far off. Either way, it's a reminder that this isn't just survival for survival's sake. There's a bigger picture, even if it's currently blurry and covered in mud. Your morning ends the way it began, with orders barked at you and no real choice but to follow them. You grab your musket, sling the strap over your aching shoulder, and fall into line with the others. The march begins, boots squelching in the muck, breath visible in the cold air, the sound of coughing and muttered complaints weaving through the ranks. It's not glamorous, it's not comfortable, but it's real. And here's the thing. As miserable as it is, you can't shake the feeling that maybe, just maybe, this madness is worth it. That one day, people will look back and tell this story, conveniently skipping over the smell, the blisters, and the stomach cramps. They'll call it noble, heroic, and inspiring. You'll know better, of course. You'll know it was mornings like this, a cold, wet, stinking, and relentless, that built whatever comes next. Smash that like button before things get medieval. Your job title is soldier, but really you're more like a professional sponge for mud, misery, and bad luck. You're supposed to be the heroic defender of liberty, but mostly you're defending your toes from frostbite and your stomach from collapsing in on itself. The glamour of the Revolutionary War? Yeah, that's in the propaganda posters. Here in the actual mud and smoke, it's less hero and more walking cautionary tale. The day starts with breakfast, if you can call it that. Hardtack, a block of flour and water that has been baked into a weapon-grade biscuit, is the star of the menu. You have to soak it in something hot before you can chew it without losing a tooth. Which is why guys will dunk it into coffee if they're lucky enough to have any. Coffee is rare, so more often you end up dipping it into lukewarm broth, which smells faintly like boiled socks and sadness. If you want to get fancy, you scrape off the little white worms that occasionally show up in the hardtack. And yes, you do eat it after that, because guess what? Worms are protein. Bathing is optional in the same way that living is optional. Technically, yes, but good luck convincing anyone here. You might go weeks without washing because it's freezing. The rivers are ice, and no one wants to strip down in the open when the enemy could be anywhere. That means you and everyone else smell like a cross between wet hay and a locker room after a losing season. Your uniform, if it still fits, is basically a sweat and dirt delivery system. Wool itches, wool traps smells, wool never forgets. Then there's your weapon, the musket. A long, heavy stick of iron and wood that takes so long to reload, you could knit a scarf in between shots. You keep it clean because if it misfires, you could lose a finger, or worse. Every day, part of your job is to sit down, dismantle the thing, clean it with an oily rag, and then reassemble it like some cursed IKEA project where the instructions are "Don T die." Marching is your default activity. Orders come down and off you go. 10, 15, 20 miles on boots that have the cushioning of plywood. Mud sucks at your feet like it's trying to claim you for the swamp. You feel every rock, every root. Blisters pop. Socks get wet, and your feet become a science experiment in trench rot. Some men wrap their feet in rags instead of socks because they've worn through the ones they had months ago. The rags don't help much, but at least they're not frozen to your skin. If you're not marching, you're digging. Trenches, latrines, or little fire pits to cook something. Anything. Digging with frozen hands is like trying to carve marble with a spoon, but no one's going to hand you gloves. If you have gloves, you probably acquired them from someone who left them lying around too long. There's no shame in that. Around here, if you're not willing to scavenge, you're going to suffer twice as hard. The food situation is a daily roll of the dice. Salted pork is common, which sounds delicious until you realize it. It's mostly fat and salt with just enough meat to remind you how much better it could be. You boil it to make it edible. Then drink the greasy water because calories are calories. Vegetables? Only if someone raids a nearby farm or a supply wagon actually shows up. Sometimes you go days with nothing but hardtack and whatever you can scrounge, berries, wild onions, or if you're feeling bold, something you caught with your bare hands. And you can forget about privacy. Your roommates are 50 other soldiers, a couple of dogs, and about 1,000 fleas. The tents are drafty, and when it rains, the water seeps in no matter how much you try to patch it. At night, You curl up in your damp blanket and listen to the chorus of snoring, coughing, and the occasional muttered prayer. You can hear every cough like it's a ticking clock, counting down to when you'll get sick, too. Sickness is everywhere. Dysentery, smallpox, influenza. It's like a competition to see which disease can wipe out the most men before the enemy does. You learn to recognize the smell of illness, a sweet, rotten scent that clings to the sick beds. The job nobody wants? Nurse. But if it's your turn, you're mopping up messes, holding down feverish men and trying not to breathe too deeply. And if you catch whatever they have, well, there's no hospital waiting to take you in. When you're not actively working, you're on watch duty, standing guard in the freezing dark, staring into the blackness while your teeth chatter. You strain your ears for the sound of footsteps, twigs snapping, or the distant crack of a musket. Most of the time, it's just the wind. Sometimes it's not. The boredom is worse than the danger. Hours of nothing, broken by moments where your whole body spikes with adrenaline because you think you see movement. And just when you think the day might end, someone decides it's the perfect time for drills. You line up in formation, shoulder your musket, and march in circles while an officer yells corrections at you like you re-auditioning for the role of background soldier 3 in a bad play. The mud splashes up, the wind cuts through your coat, and you keep going because stopping isn't an option. If you're lucky, you get a short break at the end of the day to sit around a fire. Maybe someone has managed to scrounge some tobacco or a deck of cards appears. You gamble with buttons, scraps of cloth, or food. You talk about home, about the food you miss, about what you'll do when the war is over. You laugh sometimes because the only other option is screaming. This is the job nobody wants, because it is not just fighting battles. It is living in between them. It's every sore muscle, every frost-bitten toe, every mouthful of tasteless rations. It's being wet, cold, tired, and hungry for weeks on end, with the promise that tomorrow will probably be exactly the same. The war might be fought in glorious, decisive moments, but it's won in the slow grind of days like these, where your biggest achievement is still being here when the sun goes down. And the messed up thing? Some part of you gets used to it. Not in the sense that it's comfortable, it never is, but in the sense that you stop expecting comfort at all. You learn to measure your days in little victories. A dry pair of socks, a decent cup of coffee, a night where you actually sleep more than 3 hours without being woken by shouting. Those tiny wins keep you going, because without them, you'd just be another nameless, forgotten casualty. So yeah, the job's terrible, the pay is worse, the food's a joke, and yet here you are doing it anyway, because someone has to. And maybe, just maybe, one day people will look back and think this was noble. They'll have no idea how much it stank. Your day is already bad, but then you remember the people you have to spend it with. The army isn't a hand-picked team of elite warriors. It's more like someone shook a tavern upside down, collected whoever fell out, handed them muskets, and called it a unit. Your squad is a rolling circus of personalities, and you're stuck in the front row. First, there's Ezekiel. He's old enough to be your father, maybe your grandfather, and he will remind you of this fact every 10 minutes. He's got one good eye, a limp from some business in the French and Indian War, and a habit of chewing on tobacco so aggressively you were surprised his jaw hasn't fallen off. He smells like smoke and stale ale, and he's got a laugh that sounds like someone trying to start a stubborn fire. He's not fast, but he's clever. He can fix a broken strap with nothing but twine and swearing, and he always seems to know where to find an extra bit of food when you're starving. No one asks where it comes from. Then there's Thomas. If confidence was food, Thomas would be the fattest man alive. He struts around camp like the war is just a stage for his personal drama. He claims he's irresistible to women, which might be true if those women have no sense of smell and a deep appreciation for men who talk with their mouths full. His hair is always just a bit too long, his shirt unbuttoned one too far, and his grin permanently crooked. You've seen him lose a fight, win a fight, and once, somehow, convince a farmer to give him a chicken for morale purposes. Next up is Samuel, the quiet one. You'd think that would make him easy to get along with, but no, his silence is unnerving. He watches people like he's constantly weighing their value in ounces of gunpowder. You've never heard him raise his voice, but you've seen him move faster than anyone else when things get ugly. Rumor has it he's run messages through enemy lines before. Rumor also has it that he's killed more men than he'll admit. No one asks him to confirm either story. And of course, you've got a sergeant. Yours is Sergeant Harrow, though everyone calls him Sergeant Doom. He's got a face like a carved oak tree and a voice that can strip paint off a wall. Harrow believes in discipline the way some men believe in God. Absolutely, without question, and with the occasional use of fear. He'll make you redo drills until your legs feel like jelly, and if you even think about stepping out of line, he'll be right there, breathing down your neck. The worst part? He's usually right. Around the edges of camp, you've got the civilians. The tavern owners who will water down your beer and still charge you double. The farmers who'll sell you food, but only if you're willing to help mend fences or haul manure for an hour first. The wives and daughters who bring supplies and who have to fend off the bolder soldiers who forget their manners after too much rum. Every person you meet out here has a hustle, a side deal, or a scam. Conversations around the fire are the only real entertainment. You sit on logs, warming your hands over the flames, and the talk goes from ridiculous to grim in a heartbeat. Someone might be telling a story about falling into a frozen river, and the next minute you're hearing about a friend who didn't make it back from patrol. There's a strange rhythm to it. Jokes, then silence, then someone changes the subject because no one wants to sit too long with the heavy stuff. You've got rivalries in camp, too. Some are small, like arguments over who gets the last bit of tobacco. Others are bigger, grudges carried from one posting to the next, sparked by stolen food, insults, or even a badly timed prank. Sometimes these spats boil over into fights. You've seen men rolling in the mud, fists flying, while others stand around placing bets. The officers usually break it up, but not before a few teeth go missing. And don't forget about the spies. Everyone talks about them and everyone suspects someone. Maybe it's the guy who disappears for hours without explaining where he's been. Maybe it's the one who asks too many questions about troop movements. Maybe it's just paranoia. But the truth is, you know there are British eyes and ears close by. Sometimes too close. Once you saw a stranger in camp who swore he was looking for his brother. He left before anyone could check his story. The next day, the enemy seemed to know exactly where to attack. Coincidence? No one believes in coincidences out here. When the day's work is done, you get a clearer look at the personalities around you. Some men carve little figures out of wood to pass the time. Some gamble until they've lost every button off their coat. Some write letters home, even if home is too far away for those letters to ever arrive. There's a strange intimacy to seeing people in these small moments, when they are not soldiers but just tired humans trying to keep a piece of themselves from getting swallowed by the war. And then, there are the troublemakers, the guys who can seem to go a single day without bending the rules. They slip away to drink in secret, they trade stolen goods, they make up excuses to avoid the worst chores. Some get caught and punished, others don't. You can't decide if they're reckless or brilliant, maybe both. The thing is, you don't get to choose your company here. You're stuck with them, for better or worse. The loudmouths, the quiet killers, the grizzled veterans, the cocky kids, the ones you trust with your life, and the ones you'd rather keep in your peripheral vision at all times. This mess of personalities is your army. Your dysfunctional, irritating, sometimes inspiring army. Sometimes the worst part isn't the enemy. It's surviving each other. You learn who snores like a dying bear, who steals blankets, who forgets to clean their share of the mess. You learn which arguments aren't worth having, and which ones you're willing to risk a black eye for. And slowly, without meaning to, you start to understand that you're part of this messy, smelly, half-starved family. Because when things go wrong, and they always do, these are the people who will stand next to you in the line of fire. They might drive you insane when the muskets are silent, but when the shooting starts, you want them there. Not because they're perfect, not because they're noble, but because they were just as stubborn as you are about surviving this nightmare long enough to see what comes after. Night is supposed to be the time you rest, but out here, it's when the whole world feels sharper, colder, and more dangerous. The day's noise dies down. No marching boots, no shouted orders. Just the crackle of a few stubborn campfires and the quiet breathing of men too tired to even dream. But you can't relax. You can't trust the dark. It hides everything. And in war, what you can't see is what kills you. The cold settles in first. It's not the kind of chill you can shake off by rubbing your hands together. It creeps under your coat, slides along your spine, and makes a home in your bones. Your breath comes out in little clouds, disappearing almost as fast as they appear. The ground beneath you is stiff with frost, and if you're lucky enough to have a blanket, it's already damp from the night air. The fire is small. You can risk a big one, unless you want to draw attention. So you huddle closer, feeling the heat fade the second you step back. Then there are the sounds. The wind moving through the trees makes a soft, steady whisper, like it's trying to tell you something you don't want to hear. Branches creak. Somewhere far off, an owl calls, low and haunting. Every so often there's a snap. Maybe a twig, maybe an animal, maybe not an animal at all. Your ears strain to separate the normal forest from the abnormal. You start to imagine shapes moving just beyond the firelight, shadows that shift too smoothly to be the wind. If you're on watch duty, you're pacing the edge of camp, musket in hand, boots crunching softly against the frozen ground. The night blurs your vision. One moment it's nothing but black. The next you think you see movement, a flicker of pale light between the trees. Your heart kicks up. You grip your weapon tighter. Was it the moon? Was it a lantern? Or was it just your tired brain playing tricks? Out here, you never really know until it's too late. Inside the camp, danger takes different forms. Men get restless in the dark. The cold and hunger gnaw at their tempers. Sometimes it's just muttered complaints around the fire, but sometimes it turns ugly. A drunken argument can explode into a fistfight before anyone has time to intervene. Bottles shatter, voices rise, and for a few tense minutes, you are not thinking about the British. You are thinking about whether someone you know is going to get stabbed by his own comrade. Desertion is another shadow that hangs over the night. Men disappear. Sometimes they leave in ones or twos, slipping quietly past the sentries when they think no one's looking. They take what they can carry, a musket, a blanket, maybe food if they're lucky enough to have any, and they're gone. The next morning, their absence is just one more thing no one talks about too loudly. You tell yourself they probably went home. You don't think about the other possibilities, captured, killed, or worse. And then there's the enemy. Night raids aren't common, but they happen often enough to keep everyone tense. You might be sitting by the fire when the first musket shot cracks through the dark. It's a sharp, shocking sound, like someone ripping the night in half. In an instant, the camp transforms. Men scrambling for weapons, boots pounding the ground, shouts cutting through the air. The firelight flickers wildly as shadows rush past. Some friend, some foe, and you try to keep your wits while the chaos swallows you whole. Even without gunfire, you can feel the enemy out there, somewhere. Maybe it's the way the wind shifts, carrying the faint smell of smoke that isn't yours. Maybe it's the quiet too deep for comfort, like the whole forest is holding its breath. You know they're out there, watching, waiting. You've heard the stories of sentries found with their throats cut, of camps overrun while the men slept. Those stories get louder in your head when you're alone in the dark, gripping your musket so hard your knuckles ache. And if it's not the British, it's nature itself. Wolves prowl the edges of camp, their eyes glowing faintly in the firelight before they vanish into the black. The sound of their howls travels through the cold air, raising the hairs on your neck. They're not interested in the men usually, but the smell of food, the bodies of the dead, can draw them closer. You don't want to be the one to find out what happens if they get bold. The smells of night are as vivid as the sounds. Smoke from the fires clings to your clothes, mixing with the sharp tang of gunpowder from earlier drills. The air is damp, heavy with the scent of wet earth and rotting leaves. Somewhere, someone is cooking, salted pork maybe, and the greasy smell drifts on the breeze, mingling with the less pleasant odor of latrines and unwashed bodies. If you manage to sleep, it's never deep. Your dreams are short, restless things interrupted by the smallest sound. A twig snapping can have you awake, heart hammering, fumbling for your weapon before you even know what you heard. Your body stays half alert, like some part of you refuses to believe it's safe, because it isn't. It never really is. And still, there are strange moments of beauty in the dark. The stars above are endless, brighter than you've ever seen, as if the whole sky has caught fire. The moon sometimes rises silver and full, throwing pale light across the camp, making every frost-covered branch glisten like glass. For a few minutes, it's almost peaceful, until you remember where you are and why you're here. When dawn finally comes, it's slow, almost reluctant. The sky lightens to gray and the shapes around you slowly become clear again. You feel the tension ease just a little. Another night survived. Another chance to face whatever the day decides to throw at you. But as you stand there in the cold, watching your breath fog the air, you know the next night is already waiting. And out here, night is never just night. It's a living thing with teeth.